Friends is a pretty good episode of Taxi. This is the 15th episode of the first season. This is directed by the wonderful James Burrows, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And most of it focuses on Bobby and Tony and some goldfish, but there's one moment that I really want to mention that I rather liked. My opinion of Latka is quite confused. The opinion itself is very confused by what it actually is. Because I don't like Latka, but I often find him funny. I guess by that, I mean, when I'm not finding him funny, I find the character irritating. But he does also have the ability to make me laugh. And he did on this occasion because he was asking Louie if he could go to the dentist, and Louie eventually gave him permission. And Latka was telling him that, you know, all of these people say all of these bad things about you, Louie, and he lists off some mean comments. And then, of course, you're waiting for him to say something like, but you're actually a good guy, or something that is more likely to be said by Latka. But he just walks away. He doesn't finish it, and he walks away. And me describing it doesn't sound funny, but it genuinely amused me, both in terms of Latka's delivery and also Louie's response. The rest of it focuses on Tony and Bobby, and Alex has quite a lot to do in this as well. Tony is going away for a fight, and he asks Bobby to look after his 2 goldfish. And honestly, I read the brief description for this on IMDb, and I kind of thought, really? This is going to be about goldfish? And honestly, I still have the same opinion. Tony does explain at one point that, yes, they're just goldfish, but if they can survive in this world, then it gives him hope about survival. And I kind of get it, but also I don't like fish, by which I mean goldfish are okay, but I'm very creeped out by fish in general, so I don't understand that. But nevertheless, maybe that's why it's kind of so funny as well, because it's such a big ordeal about 2 little goldfish. And unfortunately, Alex and Latka are over at Bobby's to watch a game, and Alex notices that the little goldfish might not be alive. And here is where you need to suspend disbelief, because Bobby explained he might have forgotten to feed them. But the thing is, and I googled this to make sure, fish can survive quite a few days without food. So unless Tony had also forgotten to feed the fish in the days leading up to Bobby looking after the fish, they're not going to die of starvation. So you do need to kind of look past that. But if you can look past that, it's a pretty good narrative. And Tony comes home from the fight. It didn't go well. He's looking forward to seeing his fish. He bought them a little castle. One of those little castles that sit on the gravel in the bottom of the tank. And it was quite cute to see him being excited by this. And instead of telling him what happened, Bobby tried to convince him that the new fish were the dead fish. And he presents the 2 fish in the fishbowl. And I like the fact, I mean, maybe it was obvious, but to me it wasn't, the fact that for a good 3 or 4 seconds, it seems like Tony believes they're the same fish. I genuinely thought for those few seconds that Bobby was going to get away with it. And, of course, Tony realised immediately. Well, he didn't actually. He realised they weren't his fish. And he said they would make great friends for his fish. Where are my fish? And obviously he eventually finds out what happened. And he's furious. And again, I struggle to get behind this sentiment because I don't like fish. I had goldfish as a child. I had 1 goldfish. And my cat, at the time, swiped her paw on the fish. The fish fell out of the fishbowl. It had a big scratch down its side. And we managed to get it back in the bowl. And that fish lived for, I think, over 10 years. It was called Sabrina. That's irrelevant to this episode, but that's my longest fish relationship. And honestly, I didn't get upset when she died. I find the fish became quite a big size for a goldfish, for a pet goldfish. And I just find them slimy. So I don't really understand where Tony is coming from. But I will say, I'm also kind of glad that it was just goldfish. Because had Bobby been looking after basically any pet. Well, any mammal, I guess. If he'd been looking after any kind of mammal-based pet, then I probably would have become a little bit too emotional at the dead animals. So I'm glad they went with fish, but it does seem a little bit ridiculous to me. But nevertheless, Tony is very upset, and he and Alex eventually go to talk with Bobby so they can air things out, and Bobby had a chance to do the right thing, and I was really disappointed in him in this particular scene. I think I was more disappointed in him than Tony and Alex were, because Bobby actually comes in with a date, and he tells his date to wait outside, and Bobby agrees or decides to take them out. After they have a little argument, the air is cleared. Bobby says, I'll take you out for, I think he said, steak. Then he remembers his date, Dominique, and he's going to go and tell her that this is the plan. He'll take them out. He'll presumably see her later. And he goes into the other room, and we're waiting and waiting. Alex and Tony throw a football around, and then they're lounging, and they keep looking at the door, and it's clear that Bobby's not coming back. And I was genuinely disappointed in him. I honestly thought he's had this chance to turn it around, to do the right thing, to prove that he is dedicated to his friends and is there for them. And instead, he didn't. Now, fair enough, they didn't wait a tremendous amount of time, but obviously it's television. We couldn't just watch them waiting for half an hour. So I was a little bit disappointed in that moment. But, as I said, I was more disappointed than Alex and Tony appeared to be. And the final scene, Tony is genuinely very happy, and I genuinely felt very sick, because Bobby comes in with a present for Tony. I honestly feel quite queasy at the thought. It's this giant, I presume, wooden board. It's absolutely huge. And we only see the back of it for a couple of seconds. And Tony's so thrilled as he gets this gift, and then he turns it around to show everybody. It's horrible. Bobby has had the 2 dead fish mounted onto the board. I don't like it at all. But Tony clearly does. And I guess that's all that's important. So they're friends again. Tony is happy and presumably has 2 new fish. I assume he kept the replacement fish. And all's well that ends well. It's not a bad episode. I quite liked it. Highlights would have to be Latka and Louie's interaction. And I guess just the way the goldfish thing played out. I don't like fish, and you do need to suspend disbelief, unless, as I said, Tony hasn't fed them in a few days, because goldfish will not die within 1 day. I can't imagine many things would die within 1 day of no food. And in general, it's a good narrative. It plays out well. There are some important messages about friendship and loyalty and commitment and not forgetting to do things you tell your best friend you're going to do. Best friend? That just came out of my mouth without thought. Would they consider themselves best friends? Maybe. I don't know. It's too early for me to really assess their friendship, but purely on this episode, it seems like they have a solid friendship, but Bobby certainly needs to do some more work. He forgot to feed the fish, and then he neglected his friends to be with Dominique. So he needs to do some work. But in general, really good episode. Definitely one that I enjoyed.